Okay, so this is the third video on the rapture. What are the signs and indicators and things that we're waiting to take place before the rapture occurs? And first part of this series, I suggested to you that the book of Revelation is the defining book of the end times. That the book of Revelation should be understood fully before we try to come up with a chronology or a series of events of how this is all going to play out. Revelation is God's last word on the events of the end times and how it's all going to play out. So it really is the book that believers should be looking at primarily and seeking to understand and to know, because it's in this book that we're going to find out the sequence of events. God drew our attention to the starry heavens through a series of blood moons, lunar eclipses that happened on Passover and Tabernacles, through the Revelation 12 sign, through the Great American Eclipse, and a bunch of other things. And so really what that did was it drew our attention to the book of Revelation, and Revelation 12 in particular. And Revelation chapter 12 is the chapter, I believe, that has the chronology for the whole 7 years in one chapter. It's the outline or the framework for the 7 years. That there is an event which starts the 7 years, and we know that that Christ will return 1,260 days after Satan is cast out of heaven, and that the woman will be fleeing or in flight and in the wilderness for 1,260 days, or times and half a time, during the 42-month reign of the beast. All right, so what is the sequence of events? Okay, so the very first thing we're going to have is the Revelation 12 sign. That's what we see in Revelation 12. The very first thing that happens is this astronomical alignment, and that did happen on the second day of the Feast of Trumpets in 2017. So I actually begin this timeline on September 21st, which was the first day of the Feast of Trumpets, and that to me is the trumpet call, the big loud sound, and that should have been getting all of our attention on that day with the sign in the heavens. So the second thing that happened is that Satan is going to be actually coming to earth. He's going to be stepping out of heaven, stopping his accusations up there for a while. He's going to be coming to earth. He's going to be bringing a third of his angels with him. He's going to take them out of heaven as backup for him. And he's standing before the woman who Revelation tells us is in travail. She's in travail, okay? And she's going to be in travail, and then the baby is going to be born, okay? So what does travail mean for Israel? Travail is war. There are numerous passages in the book of Jeremiah and Isaiah and different places that talk about men who have their hands on their belly and their faces are all aghast because they're like women in labor because of the terrible things that they're seeing. And usually it's an invasion of warriors or another army coming against them. This is what travail is for Israel, and that isn't hard to understand. Israel is going to have a war, a very bad one, okay? Really big, really bad. She's going to be in a predicament, okay? So the woman is Israel, travail is a war. So that's kind of the next thing that we're looking for. We're looking for an uptick in evil. For, when Satan casts his stars to the earth, there is going to be a definite, discernible uptick in evil. And actually, they may be here now, because I'm seeing a discernible uptick in evil just in the kinds of attitudes that people have about the unborn, for example, or, just this whole gender confusion. And people aren't even trying to eat from the good side of the tree of knowledge of good and evil anymore. Their morality is thrown out the window, and all people want to do is evil and continually. And that is kind of what was going on before the flood, okay, at the time of Noah. Just this continual wickedness and violence. So we're looking for that. And then the second thing we're looking for is a war in Israel. We're going to be here for the war, okay? Babies are not delivered until the end of labor, okay? A woman's going to go through a whole lot of pain and suffering, and then she has the baby, okay? And even then, afterward, there still is more contractions and so on as the birth process continues on, even after the baby is born. So believers are represented by the child The man-child is Christ. He's going to rule all nations. But the child is the one that's caught up to God and to his throne. That's the teknon. So Satan, it says, wants to devour the child as soon as it's born. So that should raise a couple of questions for us. We know that the child is born. Believers are going to be born, and then they're going to be caught up. Satan is going to try to devour them, which means not leave any evidence that they were ever there. He's going to try to do something to them to take them out. And then it says, but he's not able to do that, and the child or believers will be caught up to heaven. This should raise a couple of questions for us. One is, what does it mean that the child is born? Okay. And why is it that Satan wants to devour the child? Why is his focus on the child and not on Israel? That should be a huge question for people. People have an understanding that the dragon or Satan, the Antichrist, is going to be persecuting Israel. But at the time that we see this vision, he is not interested in Israel particularly. He's interested in the child. That is, his main purpose is to take out the child after it's born. And that should raise another question. Why doesn't he want to take out the child before it's born? Well, I think he does want to take out the child before it's born, and I think that's part of what he's doing. But once the child is born, then he really cannot allow them to be moved into the throne room of God. And there's reasons for that, and partly it's because we are kings and priests, and that we are the priesthood of believers who's going to be interceding for people while Jesus takes the scroll and begins his he's going to be busy doing other things. And so we're sort of the squad that's going to be stepping in and doing the intercession. You know, this is kind of a new thought for me, but, you know, asking these questions is really important. What does it mean that the child is born? I think what that means is that that believers will be changed, that our birth is our birth into our new glorified bodies. So believers will be changed. And then after we're changed, Satan is going to want to devour us. He's going to want to take us out, whatever that means and however he thinks he can do that. But he's not able to do that because then we as believers will be caught up to God and to his throne. So here's how Revelation 12 depicts the signs of the end. First, you have the great sign in heaven. That's the first thing, and that needs to happen. And that actually is the only history in the book of Revelation right now. It's the only thing that we can say, yes, this happened. And we can write a date in our Bibles next to that. The second thing that's going to happen is that Satan is going to be here on earth. He's going to bring his heavenly, angelic, nasty angels to the earth as reinforcements for him. So we can expect to see a huge increase in evil and in deception, because that's how these beings operate. And we may actually be in this phase right now. And the third thing is that Israel is going to go into a very bad war. And that's her travail. And there will be a war involving Israel, and Israel will be overwhelmed militarily. So it's towards the end of this conflict or this war that the child will be born. And that is, believers will be placed into their glorified bodies. And spiritual warfare then ensues, with Satan trying to prevent the rapture of believers to the throne room of heaven. But he's not able to do that, and believers will be caught up to God and to his throne. So here, the rapture needs to take place after the Revelation 12 sign appears in the heavens, but before Satan is cast out of heaven and the woman flees. So what this does, if the Revelation 12 sign actually started the 7 years for believers, okay, and I'm not talking about Israel. Israel has their own timeline, and that's in the book of Daniel. Revelation has a 7-year timeline for believers. We're not looking for a peace covenant. We're looking for something else. We're looking for the sign of Revelation 12, 1 and 2. That starts the 7 years for believers. What that does is it actually places us in the 7 years right now. Well, a lot of people go, oh, well, we can't be in the tribulation right now. Okay, and that's where you need to watch some of my videos on what is the tribulation really. Because we've been fed some ideas that aren't defendable biblically. You cannot biblically defend a 7-year period of the wrath of God. You can't do that anywhere. There is no indication that the wrath of God lasts 7 years. There is no indication that Persecution is 7 years in length. So our idea and understanding of what comprises the tribulation is not exactly biblical. It cannot be defended biblically. And again, I can't emphasize enough that the end time story for believers is in the book of Revelation. You have to understand this book. And the way most people go through the book or teach the book, they teach it in a very Greek way, and you're still not going to understand the story if you think that this is one long vision that just runs chronologically. It's a series of visions that overlay and overlap one another, and you have to understand this in a layered way, not in a linear way. If the Feast of Trumpets in 2017 began the 7 years, we would add 1,290 days to that date, and the reasons why we do that, and you would arrive at April 3rd, 2021. That would be the day of the abomination of desolation and the day that the woman flees. It's the date that Satan is cast out of heaven. 1,260 days after April 3rd, 2021 is the Day of Atonement according to Torah calendar. It's on September 13th of 2024, and that would be the second coming of Christ. So a likely day for the war to begin in Israel might be the 9th of Av, because that's traditionally a date when very bad things have happened to the Jews, including the destruction of both temples and a host of other things that have happened to them. So that would be a good day, if one wanted to predict such things. So that would place the war for Israel in either July or August, depending on which Hebrew calendar you use. So if the war were to start this year, the 9th of Av would either be July 13th or August 11th, depending on which calendar you use. That the war would take place and go through midsummer to late summer. Then the change of believers would be on the Feast of Trumpets, with the rapture on the Day of Atonement, which is the day that priests go into the Holy of Holies. And remember, when the veil was torn in two, access was granted for God's people to approach him. So that is the one day when priests go into that place, and that is the day that I'm assuming that the child will be caught up to God and to his throne. That would be 10 days after the Feast of Trumpets, and then 5 days later is the Feast of Tabernacles, and I believe that's when the 144,000 are going to be sealed. Before the war takes place in Israel, though, this is sort of a key thing I just want you to know, and that is that the USA is going to be in serious trouble. We're not going to be able to come to the aid of Israel. So what that means is we're going to be embroiled in our own war or invasion or natural disasters or political turmoil, election year stuff coming up, or civil unrest, or all of the above at the same time. Okay, so the U.S. is not going to be able to come to Israel's aid to help her when she is embroiled in this conflict. What that means is that we who live in America and the United States are probably going to have a few weeks, maybe a few months of our own kind of trial and tribulation. And I would just suggest to you that you have food and water and supplies for at least 6 weeks, and I would do 12 weeks if possible, so that you can make it through the war and the hard times that are going to be coming here in the United States. And then you can prepare for new bodies you'll be getting and change of address into the heavenlies. So tell me what you think in the comments section. I know this is kind of new thinking for most people. I hope you will check this stuff out in the scriptures yourself. Don't believe it just because I'm telling you this, and don't believe what other people have said to you either. You need to search these things out for yourself. So I hope you'll give me a like. I hope you'll subscribe and that you'll share this video with people you think might be interested. And we'll see you on another video. Till then, have a very, very blessed day.